Hey guys, welcome back. So now starting our talks on Jerry Dugan's Cable. And man, this is how you start a solo series. And just with the first issue alone, this brought back something that I thought would never see the light of day in Marvel Comics again. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so you can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so jumping right in, we just hop right into a match between Cable and Wolverine in a pit-like arena within Krakoa called the Quarry, which by name alone reminds me of the God Quarry from Thanos Wins, but in this case is a quarry-shaped arena that's used for competitive matches and bets so that different fighters can see who's the best. But also when one fighter wins, whoever loses would have to give them a marker, which I wouldn't put towards the equivalent of money, but rather like a bragging token or incremental trophy. But within this match, Cable uses just about everything against Logan. He uses telekinesis, he uses guns, and it has me thinking I'm not really sure what the rules are here. Whether it's a knockdown and an 8 count or what. But Cable pulls off this win against Logan after Logan cuts his gun in half and tries to use each half as boxing gloves with his claws sticking through him, to where Cable just uses his telekinesis and pins Logan to the ground, which was definitely a huge upset for a lot of the Logan fans in the crowd, which also makes me wonder what do you yell as a Wolverine fan? Do you yell Schnitt? Do you emulate other claw sounds like Booshling? Or do you just stand on the side and yell Gene? I guess it's just whatever would get Logan going. But either way, that didn't happen because he lost. And telekinesis aside, Logan would have won, at least against this version of Cable. But also what's pretty cool is this whole thing is hosted by the Silver Samurai, who I guess at this point has become the Ryan Seacrest of Krakoa, and I'm not sure if he does reality shows too. But if it does go that far, I would love to see some of these Krakoan ads and commercials, which would likely be exclusive to Krakoa. But aside from that, look at these stats though, because Callisto, who we had seen in the crowd not long ago, conversing with Tamisha Shido or Gorgon, she's 3-0. Nightcrawler and Blink, they tied, which makes sense. Pyro is on a losing streak, and he taking L's like they buy one get one. But most interesting to me is the match between Gorgon and Magic, where Gorgon won because Magic was disqualified, which has me super curious to know what did Magic do to get disqualified? Did she make Gorgon fall into limbo because she's more powerful there? What did she do? I gotta know. But in the case of Cable, after his win, as he makes his way to celebrate with Pixie and Armor, to where they run into a young mutant by the name of Curse, who asks Cable for his help to find her friend, Fauna. And one of the reasons that Curse came to Cable, it was mainly because she didn't want this to go up to the higher ranks, to whom she would call, quote, the older mutants, and mainly because her and her friend were playing somewhere that was specifically off limits. And this is a place where she describes where Krakoa ends and the monsters begin, which we know at this point from what we had seen in Dawn of X with X-Men issue 2, when Krakoa and Arakko were finally reunited after thousands of years of being separated because of these mysterious intruders who Apocalypse had to fight off. But since Arakko has rejoined with Krakoa, that portion of the island has still been deemed off limits to your general public of the island, because there are a number of creatures there that the leaders of Krakoa are still figuring out. And granted, some leaders like Apocalypse may know more than others, like for example the High Summoner, who we would eventually see, who was a child of his original Horseman War. But at the time when we talked about this, it had only explained the Summoner, but not the other creatures which we had seen on Arakko. And this really makes up more of that mystery that makes Arakko such a hazard, and it's the reason why mutants of the general public just aren't allowed in this area, and not following this rule is what got Curse and her friend Fauna in this situation. But when we jump over to Fauna, who's running from some sort of large creature, he's found by Cable fairly quickly, and mainly with Cable having a little experience in Arakko and also using his telepathy to help him out. Not to mention the help of Pixie and Armor, who came with as well. But when they do find Fauna, it's not long after where they also find what was chasing them, which was this dog-like hyena-faced, lion-bodied something, which was also huge. But it immediately explains why this little kid was freaking out. And because of this, Pixie sprinkles her pixie dust over Fauna, but it actually causes him to move closer to this beast, because for Fauna he believes that it's all just a game, which caused him to get dangerously close. But with Cable getting him out of the way and getting Pixie to carry Fauna out of there, this then left Cable in a very danger-close situation, which nearly got him stomped out. But fortunate enough, he was saved by Armor, who was able to jump to him in time and create her armor around the both of them just before the two of them were stepped on. And while they're under there, they kind of have a little moment with Armor asking him if he knew back when he asked her to join X-Force, if he knew that they would be friends in Krakoa. And of course, with asking him this, she's referring to the older Cable, which we know this younger Cable isn't too fond of, being that he killed him. But really more so in this moment, it was Armor kind of showing Cable how she feels about him. But for Cable, in this moment, his mind was more so set on what was sticking out of this big monster's paw, which they got an up close look at, being that they were up underneath it inside of some glowing armor. But after getting out from under there, the next move was pretty much figuring out how to get this thing out. Because you know, usually if you pull something out of a creature's paw, it'll be your best friend for life. Or at least I'm sure that I've seen that somewhere. But in order to get this thing out, they come up with the plan of Cable knocking it over just to stun it, and after doing so, having Armor lift up the paw so that Cable could pull out whatever this thing was. But initially with trying to pull it out, Cable can't. At least not with his bare hands. But then after that, he then tries using his telekinesis, which is definitely much stronger than he physically is. But with using his telekinesis, he's able to pull it completely out. And when he does, as it turns out, it's a huge sword. And a super significant one, but we'll get to that. But with Cable pulling this sword out with his mind, which totally feels like a Star Wars moment, the creature just takes off, doesn't even say thank you. But immediately after that, with Cable holding the sword in his left hand, which notably is also his metal arm, and when he does this, the sword lights up, and he's immediately taken into the memories of the previous owner of this sword, who was Morn, the Space Knight, which took this whole thing in a whole nother direction, which kind of confused me for a little bit, but I'm gonna go with it for now. Because when Cable has his flashback, and he sees himself as Morn, who's a Space Knight and the first of his kind, wielding the same sword, which is the Light of Galador, which then reminded me of Rom, who's a Space Knight, first of his kind, member of the Galadorian race, which really just had me thinking, is Morn just Rom spelled backwards with a N on the back? Because if it is, this alternate Cable thing may have just gotten way more complicated. But I'll admit, I find this connection super intriguing for a number of reasons. Because when Cable has this flashback where he appears to be the Galadorian by the name of Morn, who's going through space and hunting creatures to where he makes his way to Earth, we then find that Morn's life ends, much like how Cable's almost did, because Morn was crushed by that same beast, which is likely when his sword was stuck in its paw. And when Cable wakes up from this vision, he immediately feels a connection to this sword, like it fits who he is, much more than any of the guns, which he feels like the guns are more of the older Cable type of thing. But with feeling this connection to the sword, Cable decides to keep it. And with doing so, it feels like for him, it's another step further in the separation between this younger time-displaced Cable and the older version of himself that he killed, who he never really liked. But right after this, here comes Dad. And when Cyclops gets there, Armor's just like, okay, this whole thing, it was Cable's idea. And she just leaves on that note. But what's interesting is that here, Cable tells his father Cyclops everything, including the detail to where Cable touched the sword with his metal arm or his left hand and it triggered the flashback. But it's here where he shows this to Cyclops, where he immediately recognizes that because of the weight of this sword, it definitely wasn't made on Earth. But it's not long after this to where much of this Galadorian history starts to come together. Because when we go millions of miles away to another galaxy, which is highly advanced, even to the point of this museum orbiting around a dying star. But in this museum, you have relics from lost civilizations, and amongst these relics, 3 of which are Galadorian Space Knights, who are most certain are like your first generation, mainly because they've been hibernating for over 3 millennia. But it's here not long after Cable has found the Light of Galador, to where it awakens these 3, they break out of the museum and they immediately make their way to Earth. But as far as these 3 specifically, I'm not exactly sure if they're the same first generation exactly, and like from what we're given, they're definitely first generation. But even with doing so, it's much more likely that they're a variant to the first generation team, much like Morn was in comparison to Rom, and we'll likely see them wielding swords rather than retro space blasters. But on top of that, because that ain't even everything. But after that, we jump to another place in another time, to where we see this huge silhouette and he's like interrogating this crab, like, hey crab, where you going? Under the sea. Nah, but really the silhouette is interrogating the crab, asking him like, where is he? And even though we're not told quote unquote who he is, we do see the figure who's asking this, and when we see him, it's the older Cable. Which is a crazy way to end it, because in this alternate time, there's no telling which Cable this is, but I'm pretty sure when he meets the younger Cable, there's gonna be some problems. And at this point, like, we don't even know like if he's looking for that younger Cable, or if he's looking for Apocalypse. Like, this could literally go anywhere. But aside from this, there's one thing that I also want to mention, which is something that took place in Fallen Angels. And I know at this point, like, Fallen Angels is like the only thing we haven't covered. And to be honest, because like every time I'm about to do that video, I end up doing something else, like a different video. But during that series, we are given the information that Cable will bring unity between technology, mutants, and humanity. which just comes back around and makes this first issue like even that much crazier. Because it would be insane if we found out that the techno-organic virus originally had a Galadorian background, which we later find out that Apocalypse discovered on Araco and gave to Cable in the future. Which I know would be wild, but all of a sudden, it's all possible. So real quick, I just want to give a shout out to all the Patreons and thank each and every one of you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants to learn how to support the channel, I got a link down below to where you can head to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, because for a fact we know that this is heading into Ten of Swords, but from the looks of it, I believe this is heading into a whole lot more. But let me know your thoughts down below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.